Hello, everyone. My name is Brian Piper, and I'm the Andrew Mellon Foundation Assistant Curator of Photographs at the New Orleans Museum of Art. This week, we are turning our attention towards themes of home and how artists address some of those themes in their work. And I've invited artist Kathleen Tunnell Handel here to talk about her project, Where the Heart Is, Portraits from Vernacular American Trailer and Mobile Home Parks. Just by way of introduction, Kathleen studied observational and systems-based life sciences at Cornell University. She's earned a BFA in textile design at the Rhode Island School of Design. And she studied photography at the International Center of Photography and Santa Fe workshops, among other places. In the course of this project, she has engaged in deep research into affordable housing, which has entailed collaboration with residents and owners of the parks and the homes, as well as policy advocates. I could list the number of states that she has worked in or photographed in for this project, but I think that would eat up a lot of time. So I just wanted to get to start having a conversation about this work. And Kathleen, I guess we met about 2 years ago at PhotoNola with the New Orleans Photo Alliance. Is that right?
Yeah, yes,
Yeah.
Thank you so much for looking at my work then, and I appreciate the support of sharing my project now.
Great. Well, I'm going to hit pause, and Kathleen's going to share her desktop so we can see some of these photographs. I'm really excited to start talking about it. Okay, one moment. Okay, we're back. Kathleen, could you tell us a little bit about how you conceived of this project and how long you've been working on it?
Sure, Brian. The project started in 2017, and I actually didn't even know I was setting out to do a project. I just happened to be in Colorado photographing and saw a mobile home community. And I realized I had never been in one, and the little bit I saw from the road looked interesting. So I wandered in and started photographing, and really pretty immediately got very entranced by how much personality was visible in the exterior of people's homes, the kinds of things they put out to I guess see when they came home, the ornamentation, even the fencing, the structures themselves. I just found it really interesting. And the more I ended up continuing to photograph and the more people I encountered and spoke with, it just became a way to connect with people, which I had not expected to be one of the bonuses of the project, and hear a lot of people's stories that I could really then try to represent visually in the images and things that were catching my eye. I live in a high-rise in New York City, and it's a pretty anonymous lifestyle. There's, the density maybe is the same as a mobile home community, but I have very little sense of my neighbors. I can hear them just like you can in a mobile home community, but there certainly is nothing like what you're seeing in this image, where people who live in this mobile home clearly want their neighbors to have some sense of who they are, what they find beautiful, what they want to see themselves when they come home. So
yeah, that's one thing that I really enjoy about these is the sense of personality that comes through when you're walking. I mean, I guess walking through the parks. When we spoke the other day, you mentioned your real interest in being specific about the language that you use for these homes and these communities. Could you talk a little more about that?
Sure. There's obviously so much stereotyping and bias against mobile home communities, this housing form, people who live in these kinds of homes. And in speaking with people and hearing their stories and having often people tell me about their lives and their problems, it inspired me to start reading more about it. And I realized that having some understanding of both the history of why this housing form is in our country and really what it's about would help maybe dispel some of those stereotypes. So basically, trailers, mobile homes, and manufactured housing are all made in factories in this country. It's a fairly uniquely American housing form. And they're built on a steel chassis and pulled to their house site by, in the early days, when trailers like this one were what people were using to travel around and have as a home. A family car would be pulling them. So up until probably the 1950s, basically this was a trailer. Then as World War II was winding down and veterans were coming home and having growing families, there was a greater and greater need for affordable housing. So mobile homes started being manufactured, basically bigger versions and much less mobile versions, despite their name of mobile homes, started being manufactured in this country. And I guess there was a heyday when there weren't so many stereotypes. But things have progressed now. Currently, the proper terminology is manufactured housing. Still built in the same way, but you can see that in 1976, there was a federal building code enacted. So they're much more stringent insulation standards and safety standards and things like that. So it's interesting in traveling in different communities and meeting with people. There's a lot of heated debate about what it's proper to call these homes. And it's kind of a mouthful. My project really is about all of these homes. So I can't really, every time I say something about the project, say trailers, mobile homes, and manufactured homes. So enough people know what mobile homes are that when I say that, they know what I'm talking about. And I try to do so respectfully, but it's just sort of my shorthand.
Right. So it sounds like in different communities, they all have different ways of talking about it. I'm also interested in your use of the word vernacular in your title. Does that refer to the commonality of this housing structure, or the ways that people are self-styling them to have some of their personality shine through, or both?
It's kind of both, Brian. Yeah, I refer to this as vernacular architecture, and I know a lot of architects, and the difference to me in using the term vernacular is it's really of the region, it's more of the people, and so it really is both the lifestyle, the actual structures themselves, which are increasingly imperiled. It's a great marker of our country's history, the whole progression from trailer to mobile home to manufactured home. So I thought it was kind of important to, in a way, archive the history and the evolution of this really important housing form.
Yeah, I hate to put you on the spot, but can we back up a few slides to the relocation slide? Be able to do that?
Sure.
Yeah, I think this was one I hadn't seen before last week, and it's a little bit different in that it has some movement where the others are fixed. Can you talk a little bit about this one? What was happening? Did you get any of the story behind this photograph?
Well, it was one of those flash moments. I was actually just in this little turnaround trying to go back the other direction on this road you see. And I noticed that traffic was stopped. So I pulled the car up a little bit and all of a sudden realized what an amazing coincidence this was, that I was actually seeing the delivery of a new home. So it was street photography, basically. Maybe,
yeah.
maybe that's the but it's the only time I've actually seen a structure on the road underway that I was able to photograph. So
this is a brand new unit that is being pulled into a lot for someone to move into?
I believe it is.
Okay.
It's a little mysterious to me. I did hang around enough to see somebody greeted the truck driver and accepted the delivery, and I didn't really pursue it any further than that. So.
One of the things, and I'll ask you to go forward in a second, but one of the things that really draws me into a lot of your work is the use of lines. Could you go to the one on Maine, the portrait of Maine #1, I think?
The typology portrait?
Yeah, this one is one of my favorite images in the series. The more I look at them, I see you lining up parallelisms a lot, and I don't know if you could maybe in a second talk about how that's conscious, but we have these two, I guess, small cedar bushes, the tree and the light pole, the cutout cowboy or gardener, I guess. And the eagle on
Cowboy
top.
gardener.
Yeah. So often there's parallel lines and structures that sort of let your eye dance around in a lot of these photographs. Could you talk a little bit about your process of composition and what catches you as you're walking around in these communities?
Sure. Well, with my background in woven textile design and art, that's really where my visual arts training lies. And I think you can see by the use of line and color that that comes through a lot. When I'm actually walking around photographing, I feel like I'm really photographing from the heart. I'm not necessarily really thinking. I mean, first I notice something just by what really grabs my gut, that there's something special about the possibilities of what I'm looking at, and then in trying to figure out a composition that really tells a story. And that's why I think these really are portraits of the people who own these homes. As I'm photographing them, that you can see how much of a narrative there is in what people have done to the exterior, and catch little glimpses.
You've told me you've gotten some pushback on calling them portraits. Is that correct?
Well, I guess it's like mobile home, manufactured home. Portraits, to some people in our art community, must have people in them. And yeah, so it's been interesting as I've shown the project to different people. There's some that really question my use of the word portrait, and others are very supportive that you don't have to have a human being to have a portrait of a person, because I think what really draws me in is the traces of a person that you can see in what their choices are.
Right. Well, before we look at some of those, I do want to say also that one of my favorite parts of this image is that little field of yellow that sort of anchors it right there, that really draws your eye in. It really completes everything else. I really like that part.
Thank you. Yeah.
Are one of the next ones maybe a grid? Can't remember.
I think we have passed the live oaks to.
Yeah, let me move us. Now, can you tell us about your choice to use these typology grids and what that word means to you in terms of your work?
Yeah, it's funny. In trying to figure out why these became so necessary a part of my project, and this is another thing, I had a lot of pushback initially about, grids in general.
Yeah.
I partially attribute it again to my textile design background. The interweaving of here, it's really an interweaving of elements. In trying to make a grid, it's really kind of a challenge to look through all the photographs I've taken within a state. Every one of my grids is all images from within one state, just
okay.
First of all. And then finding commonalities. I think the grid format really enables your eye very quickly to look at some commonality, but then also very easily see the subtle differences between them. So it's another way that I feel like my work is about bringing out the personality of the people who live in the homes, and again, defying a lot of the stereotypes that I think many of us have based on TV shows and the films we see, where the emphasis is on the poverty and the downtrodden characters that live in these communities. And while I certainly have been in communities where there is an incredible amount of hardship and poverty, it certainly is not reflective of the demographics of the wide array of kinds of people I've talked to.
Yeah. To me also, as a photo historian, that sort of split between typology and portraits has a lot to do with the history of photography. And I mentioned to you the other day that when I think of typology, I think of photography being used in the past for sort of pseudoscience around race, and portrait being used to individualize someone. So I think you're using that history as well of photography to sort of explode these stereotypes of the architecture, whereas in the past it was used to explode stereotypes about people's physical body and their I don't know, their ancestry. So I think that's very smart too. I love some of the details that you pick up as well around these homes.
Yeah, I walk around photographing really often with a huge grin on my face. It's amazing to me, again, because I guess I live in New York City, and the freedom that I see of people to express their values, their beliefs, their sense of aesthetic. I love the idea that, this is what somebody really wants to see when they come home,
Right.
and that this is also what they want their neighbors to see. And I find it interesting because I can hear my neighbors in New York, and you learn about people when you live in the kind of density that you do in an apartment building or in a mobile home community. And I think it's interesting that nonetheless that there is this human need to beautify and create. And I had one community owner, when he was asking me why I wanted to walk around his property, say, "Oh, you want to photograph the yard art." And I feel like in a way we value outsider art. And I feel like it's such a clear expression of people's personalities.
Mm-hmm.
Great.
Yeah. Do you want to move ahead?
Sure.
Slide. I mean, yeah, this is a great example of that sort of adornment. One common theme that I do see showing up is a lot of American flags, right? That's sort of a
Absolutely.
motif.
Yes. Yeah, it's been interesting as I've traveled to different states, and I have tried to be in different parts of the country, basically,
Mm-hmm.
and seeing what kinds of themes are kind of ubiquitous and which are very regional. But definitely the American flag is very, very proudly evident. And of course, being a New Yorker, I don't know if you can see in the window, the little framed placard on the left is 9/11. So,
Yeah.
I'm a City person who saw that go down.
Yeah.
I find that very touching that that's still something special as far away as this was from New York City.
Yeah. I mean, it really is a good reminder of place as well. And, your insistence that this is an American architectural, form, or American kind of housing as well. Could you tell us a little bit more about your interactions with people in these communities? And then as well, I'd like to hear more about the in-home conference that you told me about the other day.
Oh, right. Um, yeah, I've had so many conversations. I mean, I've literally had half-hour conversations with people, and I guess it's a little odd for someone to be walking around photographing in front of your house. So I've certainly had the gamut of interactions, um, but it's been really interesting to see how. And I guess one of the things that also first drew me to the project was what kind of community feeling there is in a lot of these communities. The first week I started photographing, I was in walking down one street, and there were kids riding their bikes down the streets and saying, "Oh, you be this and I'll be that and we'll do this and that." And it just reminded me of the suburban neighborhood where I grew up. And I guess I wasn't really sure that kids were still allowed to just be out by themselves playing, and their families felt comfortable with the community that they could do that. And, I see neighbors visiting on stoops, and lots of people very curious, of course, about what I'm doing, and many when I explain the project. And I've always bring around a little mock-up of some of the pictures I've taken to reassure people. I'm not. I get asked if I'm an assessor, and
Yeah.
I guess I would also say since the project started in 2017, things were a little calmer in our country. The curiosity was really more, what are you doing? Versus, I think people have now become a little more suspicious about what I'm doing. So I've heard
Yeah.
stories about people's recently deceased spouses and financial trouble, and it really was what got me started in the research portion of my trip, my project. That just understanding the financial hardship that a lot of people are suffering from, and the insecurity that this housing form can bring.
Yeah, a lot of these communities are really under duress, correct, and threat. But it's a viable, option for people to own their own home.
Absolutely. I mean, it really is, it's the classic American dream that, this gives lower income people, not always lower income people, but it certainly provides an affordable, it's actually the largest non-subsidized form of affordable housing in our country. And also, it turns out that an estimated 20 million Americans live in mobile homes. Um, in the greater sense of the word between trailers and mobile homes and manufactured homes. So
Right?
yeah, it's a very important housing option for people just starting out or retirees, veterans. I've spoken to so many kinds of people, immigrants, working poor, grandparents raising their kids.
You mentioned to me before that you've gone to these conferences and spoken with what I guess policy advocates, housing policy advocates, and they mentioned that normally when people take photographs of these homes, they're doing quote unquote poverty porn, right? But your goals are very different.
Yeah, I'm hoping, and from the response, I do seem to be on track with really with dignity, showing that this is just home. These are, all the othering that gets done in the media. I grew up seeing trailer parks always portrayed as, dens of crime and just abject poverty. And again, that can exist. I'm not trying to be a Pollyanna about this at all. I've certainly seen some places that feel like that, but it really is, as you can see by this picture, this is just someone trying to live their life, and they have their home, they have a yard, they have a fence. It's the American dream.
Yeah. How do you? This is a hard question that I think a lot of us deal with. I mean, in putting together photography exhibitions, how do you walk that line between showing a positive side, but not painting everything in rose-colored glasses, to mix my metaphors?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's a tension that I'm still aware of, and I don't know that I really have a solution. I have had people say my images portray too much of the positive side.
Mhm.
But countering that, and kind of maybe to answering your question earlier that I didn't quite answer, I've ended up trying to collaborate and show my work to lots of different kinds of people to be sure that my portrayal is comfortable and accurate, and dignified. So I've collaborated with urban planners. There's a wonderful sociology professor at the University of Colorado in Denver, Dr. Esther Sullivan, who's written a book called Manufactured Insecurity, which really got me started in thinking about a lot of the deeper issues with this housing form. And I had the pleasure of meeting with her a few times and showing her my work and getting her feedback. And actually showing her my work, and a couple of the images, she said, this is getting a little close to the stereotype. And so I still grapple with showing enough of that to have people understand that is a real side of this, but not just be feeding into stereotypes. I also did last November go to a conference by an organization called Prosperity Now. They had a conference in Portland, Oregon called I'm Home, 100% focused on the manufactured housing, mobile home, and trailer community. So it was just a great way to both get educated by listening to all the seminars and things, but also I showed my work to a lot of housing advocates, and some of whom are residents of mobile home communities, and getting feedback on the project and whether it really felt right to them. And I guess the feedback was very positive, and it's actually helped turn a corner on the project. I've been, when it's safer for me to go out and people to welcome me being there, I've been invited to go to a number of communities where I'd met residents, and actually very exciting to think about photographing more as a collaborative. So to do what I am doing anyway, but then also talk to them about what would they like me to portray. So that's a very
Right.
exciting possibility.
Great. Do you think that you might take photographs of work people in there, or you just want to stick with the built environment?
You know, I get asked that question a lot, and
Yeah.
it's certainly something I've had to think about a lot. I kind of, I guess, feel like there are so many stereotypes about people who live in these kinds of communities
Mhm,
that I'd have to be super careful to represent um, the demographics properly so it wouldn't feed into the stereotypes.
mhm,
And I just don't know that my project needs to take that on.
mhm,
I feel like the people are very well represented by the images of their homes and the things they choose to put outside of their homes.
mhm.
So at the moment, I get asked actually a lot of times by people if I'll take their pictures, and I always, if they want me to, I always do, but I have not incorporated them really officially into the project.
Yeah, I was just curious, and
Yeah,
I'm kind of sure that you've gotten those questions before. I mean, on the one hand, I feel like your work sort of fits in with a genre of landscape and built environment
right,
photography that's known for not having people. I don't think it's a stretch to, align it with Eugene Adjé, right? I mean, taking photographs of empty Paris streets, or the Beckers, which have these typographies just like you, Robert Adams or Zoe Leonard. Those sorts of things are focused on the forms and trying to draw out personality. I want to stop on this one because it's an older photograph in terms of your timeline, but I don't think I've seen it in your portfolio before, and it was jarring because for a couple reasons, and I don't want to read too much into it. But first, the diagonal lines are a little different than some of your other photographs. Am I imagining that, or it just seems a little more chaotic?
yeah. It's interesting. This was actually one of my earliest images. This is Ellen's house, and so it's obviously in Colorado.
Mm-hmm.
This community is a very different kind of community from many that I've been to. Typically, in most communities, the land under anybody's home is leased. So it's part of the inherent insecurity that if you own your home and it's on someone else's property, they can charge whatever they want, and you're kind of
Wow.
stuck there. Mobile homes really are not very
Yeah.
mobile. They can be moved, but it costs, $10,000 or $5,000 or just some amount of money that most people who would be living in a manufactured home or mobile home don't have available.
Yeah.
Um, so this community actually is there's a movement that I learned more about when I was at the I'm Home conference towards co-oping communities. And it of course takes a willing owner to sell to the people who live on the property. But so this particular community had gone co-op, and people had a sizable, I guess it's Colorado. People had often a much bigger property, so I could get an angle uh, away from this home that is really hard in really dense communities. I'm pretty restricted in how far away. I don't trespass on people's property. I always stay on the street. There usually are not sidewalks. So I could get far enough away to actually get a nice oblique angle here. And also she invited me inside, and I spent quite a bit of time with her. Um, I think she said it was actually 3 homes that she had ended up combining. So the structure itself was actually kind of a diagonal. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, but yes, it
Yeah.
just between the aspen trees, and you can really see, moving this structure would be
Yeah.
impossible.
I mean, it's not to expose myself in a nerdy way, but it has a real like Hobbit look to it. But I love the layer of the X's on the terrace and the door and the gabled roofs. It has a um, coziness that I think sets it apart from some of the others. Not that the others are very homey, but this one's it's a little more tight, and I like that. It's a different look. So
Yeah, yeah, thank you. I love and enjoy hearing your comments about the images.
Right. And that, go ahead, here's another grid. I'll move this.
Yeah, so it's, you know, the, the, the portraits, as I call them, you can really get a sense of not only people's sense of aesthetics and home, but also their sense of security. So, you know, different communities have different feelings to them. Sometimes people seem to have tight-knit communities, and sometimes are more concerned about their neighbors. So I would say that this kind of was a natural progression, and doesn't always represent, you know, we think of fences as keeping out, but a number of these were in a very, very windy part of California. So it's actually keeping the weather out. So,
Interesting.
so in the top, the second from the top left, I don't know if you can see, there's a little German Shepherd head peeking over of a dog.
Oh, I do. Yeah, the ears.
That dog wanted to kill me in the worst way. It was
my.
terrifying, hoping it couldn't actually jump high enough to get over the fence.
Yeah. Well.
And then right next door to the left, there was there was a woman working in a garden there, and she let me come in and asked me to photograph her. Had the most beautiful garden. So I guess it's like in Italy where you never know what's behind the closed door.
Yeah, but I mean that's part of the personality too. Okay. This up here. Yeah, can you so there seem to be like, and this helps give your project some structure, I think, and maybe you can tell me, you know, to what extent you're following that. But there's, you know, there's the typology grid, portrait, entryways, in between, down the street. How did you come to that sort of those categories? Or I think on your website you even called it taxonomy, right?
Yeah, you know, I've always, I guess it's the way one of the ways I see the world, and the way my brain works is that, you know, I like to organize and categorize. When I was a little kid, I used to have my best friend we would go around our neighborhood and we would collect bird nests, and we would knock down wasp nests from people's garage. And I had collections. I had, you know, a shoebox full of bird nests and this and that and the other thing. So I think I've always been kind of interested in organizing things, again, as a way to see similarities and differences. And when I try to make a very balanced representation of what I see, both regionally and then by perspectives on people's entryways or what have you. So I found I kept sorting my photographs first by state, then by, I'll put all the entryways. What's the most interesting? What's telling the most interesting narrative about the person? Gotcha. So I finally just decided, why not just name them by how I'm actually looking at them? So if anyone else is interested, they can sort of key into that.
Structure's good. Well, you have one that's not down the street. It's down the estuary, right?
Is that coming up?
Maybe.
Yes.
There we go.
There it is. Yeah, this sort of gets into the vulnerability of mobile home communities. Historically, this kind of community has always been othered and was really only welcome to be, or often, I guess you can never say always, but often only welcome to be far away from normal residential areas. So was very often on the edge of things, and in a industrialized area or in a vulnerable to weather area. So this was a community that's right, as you can see, on an estuary in Georgia. So obviously, as you well know, prone to flooding and other things. And so there's that aspect, as well as the fact that gentrification in a lot of areas has caused the land to become more valuable. It used to be, you know, a mom and pop couple could buy many acres and put in a mobile home community, and they could have a relationship with the people who they were leasing the land to. And that's all really shifted as people have aged out of wanting to do that and wanted to sell the community. And unfortunately, this has become a huge area for equity investors. So I don't know if you know the name Sam Zell. He's one of our wealthiest Americans. He has a company that buys mobile home communities, and it's, as I mentioned before, the communities, the trailers themselves really can't be moved. So it tends to be that when an equity investor buys a property, it often is that the maintenance goes down, so people are paying for maintenance and water, electricity, what have you. Typically, things aren't as well cared for, and then the land lease cost per month goes up. So people get squeezed financially, and I've talked to many people who were just kind of at their wits' end, and this was even before, housing issues in this current economy became even more challenging. So it's just heartbreaking to think or wonder how many people are struggling even more.
Yeah, it seems really precarious. I mean, and we didn't even mention, climate change is threatening these places that are already in vulnerable spots because of the economic issues. This one's a little bit different. Can you tell me about this? It's got a title that doesn't really. Are there other pictures of the edge, or is this unique?
There are a few where I kind of felt like this really represents to me how removed. It sort of goes back to the bias against and stereotyping of communities, that there's actually really awful zoning in a lot of places that forbids mobile home communities from being built. So this kind of exemplifies the formerly on the edge, probably an industrialized area, this culvert that obviously can get incredibly deep water. And I just thought this really represented how communities used to be, far removed from, again, normal residential area, God forbid. There's also a lot of zoning where communities have to sort of try to hide themselves with fencing or landscaping or what have you. It's just this bizarre thing that it's zoned that people shouldn't have to see that there's a trailer park, a mobile home community.
Right. Well, I think that's helpful too, to get the far out view, and then you go, all the way up to the doorway, and then, there's people caring about, where they live and their front steps. I think the next one in the series is pretty shocking too. And this speaks to what you've been talking about how, they're hard to remove, but people can be kicked off of the lot correctly. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, people can be evicted. Basically, there are very few protections, and it's horrifying to think about right now, with the unemployment and people's incomes being devastated, that, if you're in an area, I know New York State has just passed some protection to not be evicted as easily, but I was hearing, people would get 30 days notice that, we sold the property, like literally every single person in the neighborhood, you need to get out. And I think in communities like that, it's just heartbreaking to see that people have been able to remove their homes successfully, as you see in this image, and seeing this is kind of shocking when you realize what's underneath the metal skirting that goes around. Is, there was some plumbing, there was some electrical lines, and that's the evidence of a home having been there is gone. I've also seen where people, because of zoning again, are not able to find a place to move their homes to, and have to abandon them. So you think of all the equity that's invested in for a family in their home, and then to have to just walk away from it.
Right.
Devastating financially, and the displacement, getting back to how important home is for everyone, and having stability, and how much it impacts your health to not have that. It's just shocking that there's so little protection.
It's you titled this absence, but it's also an erasure. I mean, the marks of that home, like you say, the plumbing, and looks like where the tires pulled out, they're still there. It looks really traumatic. And another thing I think about, and this, maybe we don't have time to go down this road, but in New Orleans, manufactured housing, quote unquote trailers have, can have a recent history and a different connotation as because of after the levees broke. And so it's interesting to see in different parts of the world, different parts of the country, how the government interacts with those communities. And I don't know, I'm kind of rambling here, but it's got a lot of different wrinkles.
Yeah. Are you talking about the FEMA trailers or other?
Yeah.
Did you know that the government put stickers on after they had to be removed from New Orleans for the formaldehyde? They put stickers on them saying that they were no longer to be used for homes, and then they auctioned them off in lots of tens of thousands, and a lot of them are on Native American reservations now.
I did, and we actually have some works in our collection about that. So not a good story, and I'm sure that's something you're interested in as an advocate. And one question this is a harder question, but if I'm saying too much, let me know. But I feel like you consider yourself an artist and an advocate for these things now. What does photography do for you that, say, simply letter writing or going down to lobby at the Capitol? What does photography do for you that the other tools in an advocate's toolbox might not accomplish?
Well, I know I'm a visual person, and I know a lot of people are visual people, especially now with the ubiquitous phone photography, etc. And I think having an image that goes along with information is a much more powerful combination than either alone often. So I actually have been talking to people about whether there are ways these images, besides having a fine arts application, can also be used in the service of the affordable housing issues that I've been mentioning. So I think it's a way to potentially draw people in that wouldn't have known of or thought about these kinds of complexities and engage them in having perhaps a better conversation about why these homes are not really considered homes by a lot of people or by zoning boards, etc. So I had this fantasy about finding someone to partner with me that we could almost do kind of pop-up exhibitions that could be in libraries or community centers or what have you, to both engage people in a broader conversation, and also in my interest in collaborating, maybe have events that you could bring in legal counsel and other professionals that might have information. I think a lot of people who live in communities are not yet aware of how vulnerable their lifestyle is, and
I think that's great. I mean, obviously, I believe in the power of photography. I think people respond to it in really, really strong ways. I also think that this image goes some distance towards sort of your interest in balancing the portrayal or the whole story, capturing the whole story. It's part of it is beautiful homes and really nice gardens, and other is the precariousness of it. So
well, and another interest is really, and this is maybe in a way part of the origin of the typology grids, is in some communities older mobile homes are being removed and they just get dunked. And it is such an important part of American history and vernacular architecture. So part of it is recording, look at this beautiful home, to just have a visual record of the whole history of, this is post-World War II, retooling wartime factories for peacetime. And, there's a whole lot of information.
Oh, yeah.
That really needs to be preserved, and it's one of the reasons I crossed over to the urban preservation community, who's interested in this as well.
Oh, wow. Would you like to continue the slides?
Sure.
When you say, you said urban reservation?
Preservation.
Preservation. Oh, okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's a history I feel like people they just don't know. I think
Well,
the colors in this one look really well. I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, you go ahead. I love hearing what you have to say.
No, I mean, you always think that, you know, for color photography, that the color has to work in the interest of the picture, and these little pops of red and purple against this sort of, what I'm guessing is the major palette of Texas being sort of brown and beige, really make that stand out to me.
Yeah, I think this image says so much about, you know, somebody with probably limited resources, but a great sense of color,
Mm-hmm.
you know, spending limited resources and their time figuring out how to make a beautiful visual statement.
Bring some beauty. Yeah.
And besides, I love the whimsy and humor. There's, you know, the whole gamut of human expression, and of
Yeah.
course humor is so important. So
Right.
I just look at this and smile at the collection of frogs, and yeah.
Okay. Yeah, here's that palette of the that Texas palette that I get from a lot of these. Is the sky really important to your photographs? You seem to really like lean into that. Is that conscious, or?
You know, I guess also living in New York City,
Oh yeah.
to be out, you know, out walking around and just experiencing whatever the weather is, and yeah, the sky, and it's interesting how the environment also, I don't have it on this presentation, but if anyone wants to go to my website, I have images, typology grids from Maine. The weather obviously is beating down on these structures, whatever it may be. So there actually are regional differences based on snow load or amount of sunlight or amount of rain. You can really see it in the surfaces and the structure.
Yeah, the things that architects think about. When you display these, or in the past when you display like a grid like this, how big is it? What is it? What does that look like?
So far, the smallest I've framed is, it frames around 17 inches high by 48 inches wide. I've
Mm-hmm.
tried to, you know, this has been kind of a relentless um, juggling and balancing act. And if the images get too small, it's too quick to just look at them and not really see what's there.
Yeah.
So that's kind of the minimum I've come to that draws people in and interests them both in what's similar, about, you know, why are these images together, and then the differences, whether it's the structures themselves or what people have put outside of their homes.
You do really need that detail that you get from a large print, right? To have all that information
Yes,
to take in.
yeah,
Yeah.
the biggest I haven't framed, but the biggest I've done like 6 feet wide, and it's just, you need to be able to get back, but also to get in and see the details is
Yeah. Wow.
fantastic. Yeah.
Okay. Oh, remove this. Now, are these in New Jersey? Where are these? Are these sort of northern New Jersey?
This particular one was more maybe central New Jersey.
Okay. All right.
Yeah, the flowers and I mean, that beautiful
Yeah.
soft turquoise color, just
Yeah. That blue is really really nice.
even that little rubber ducky on the garbage can.
Yeah.
Those
Yeah.
are,
See, that's why you need that detail, and the sort of the ubiquitous American flag on the mailbox, and even the red white mirrored with that red white and blue in the flowers.
yeah,
Yeah, those echoes show up in a lot of places, and I think that really holds your eye there as well.
yeah. And then the numbering of the different ways people number their houses, or the
Mm,
communities number the houses.
yeah, these details there. There's that whimsy.
Yeah.
Yeah, when you think of displaying these, do you sort of rotate between, you know, grid, portrait, detail, entryway, as if you were walking through one of the parks, or how have you done that in the past?
Well, not necessarily so literally, but so that there is some visual connection between the images, and that they overall tell a more complete story with some of the ideas that I'm trying to express, both visually. And I'm still grappling with, I've done a lot of writing, reading and writing and researching, and I haven't quite solidified that portion of the project. So
Yeah.
my hope to spend more of my time in quarantine getting some writing done.
Is there a title or two you could recommend to people who want to learn about the history of this housing form or current issues?
I know this is going to show backwards, and I couldn't figure this out, but this is Dr. Esther Sullivan's book that I had recommended earlier, Manufactured Insecurity. Definitely, brilliant book. Trying to think what else I have. Yeah, I have a pretty extensive library off the top of my head. I can add some titles to my website, but yeah, I've sort of done the gamut. There's a book on diners, trailers, and bowling alleys, or things that delve into both the history, the sociology.
Yeah, that's one of the things I like about this project too, is all of the interdisciplinarity of it and how things overlap. This is a beautiful garden, and maybe a nice place to wrap up. If you could sort of wrap up what you want people to take away from this project when they view it online or in a future book or exhibition, what are the sort of main themes and main ideas you hope that people take away?
Well, I guess always to look, for all of us, to look beneath the surface and really try to understand more deeply. We often have ideas in our heads that, upon greater inspection, perhaps are a little thin. So yeah, just that there is value in our American housing forms, all of them, not just the ones that have been noted in books as being notable.
Right.
And that affordable housing is really important. I mean, we're talking about veterans, young families, students, teachers, immigrants, working poor people. That housing security is important, and that the need to beautify your home is pretty universal. The need to feel like you have a home is universal and worthy of dignity and respect. Absolutely.
Thank you. Well, what's next for you and for the project? Yeah, I know you got some information for us here.
Well, I had thought I was going to be out photographing in parts of the country this year that I'm so far not able to get to. I had been invited out to some communities in the Midwest. There's a mobile home community that's all farm workers in California I was invited to. So areas of the country that I hadn't covered as thoroughly, I had hoped to photograph. And then again, to basically interview people and get more of their, I have a lot of stories in my head I haven't written down. So it would be great to get some people's stories more directly, to incorporate that into the project.
Right.
And then I have a totally different personal project I'm working on, kind of simultaneously linked by the archiving aspect of my personality. But my great grandmother, I think I inherited the archiving from. She collected all sorts of family artifacts, and I guess this also ties into just being so interested in the human touch and history. And she labeled everything from my grandfather's baby shoes to napkin rings from her grandmother and locks of hair. And anyway, so I've been photographing and trying to locate family artifact. This family stuff, when you have it, it gets sort of distributed out. But so finding long lost cousins and photographing, I found my great grandparents had made a photo album. So like this beautiful album of cyanotypes and vernacular photography from late 1800s, early 1900s. And so anyway, that's kind of linked and kind of not linked.
Well, it's a whole nother taxonomy and a family history as well, right? Biography. Yeah. Sounds great. Well, thank you so much for sharing this with us at NOMA. I encourage everyone to check out the websites and the Instagram. Kathleen's online stuff, and we look forward to seeing what's next and being in touch in the future.
And thank you so much, Brian. I so appreciate your and NOMA's support for the project and the chance to share the project with a wider audience. So thanks so much.
Thanks so much. Well, I hope all of you enjoyed it as well out there in the internets, and we'll see you soon. Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you, Kathleen.
Bye.